Yo, what is up, everybody? Popo here, bringing guys a new video, and today we're going to be looking at the top performing teams going into the World Championships. Let's go. Welcome, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at the top performing teams going into the World Championships. Sorry I didn't do my other list for top 5 players to watch. I just couldn't really find too much information on any of the Japanese or South Korean or Taiwan players. It was just very, very difficult, and I just really didn't feel comfortable with the list I was making, so I decided to scrap it. But I'll just give you my number one. It's going to be Shohei, of course, the world champion from last year. Repeat. Let's get the repeat. Let's go. So we'll see what they're able to do at the World Championships. But anyways, let's go into the teams that these players might use. We talked about all of these players from all the different regions in the world. And now we're going to talk about what teams that they might use and what teams are going to be the best and what you should expect to see. Because the World Championships is a lot different than going into these regionals and stuff where people are willing to take a little bit more of a risk on the regionals. You know, maybe doing a medical or something like that. A lot of players will kind of go out of their way to use something that's established at the World Championships, with a few people tweaking those with some of those niche picks like we have seen in the past with Pachirisu or even the Assault Vest Raichu in 2016. But more often than not, a lot of players are just playing the best team and are going to go out there and go, I'm just going to be the best Pokemon player on that day and with the best team, and I'm just going to take home the World Championship. So that's what I expect to see again at this Worlds, though I think there's going to be a little bit variation and there's going to be some changes to these teams to make them better in the matchups, the mirror matchups and stuff like that. But I want to go over this list, and you can see that there's already one team that's way ahead of all of them here. And this team has performed very, very well. As you can see at Los Angeles, this has gotten 2nd place and 3rd place. It got 10th place. Stockholm Regionals has done very well, 15th. Santiago, it got 15th. You know, another 16th from Paul Chua at the North America. And you could just see this team has been performing very well for a very long time. So it's not just a team that kind of just showed up at North American International Championships, Indianapolis Championship, Stockholm, Santiago. We had, you know, North American Internationals. You know, it's been doing very well, all these, including some of these like practice tours, like the Tommy's Tuesdays practice tours and stuff like that. It's also been performing well at. So like, this is a really good team. Look at all the way up to 105. Like, there was just so many good finishers of this team. You have the Glizzy Tour number 38, where it did really well too. So this is a team that is kind of dominating the meta right now, and a lot of people are making the joke at the moment that Raging Bolt is a 2nd restricted Pokemon and going potentially into, I think we're going to get the information in a couple of days, so maybe Tuesday next week, something like that. But going into Regulation H, that you can have a team with 3 restricted Pokemon, where this will take like a kind of Miraidon position where you can use your other 2 restricteds to really put pressure on with your electric type dragon in the back. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But sticking to this, I think this is a very good team. It has really good synergy. You got Fire, Water, Grass, which is always good, though you do have 2 water Pokemon, which is interesting. You do have 2 Pokemon that do resist lightning, one that's 4 times, so it doesn't really hurt you as much. You have the ability to put stuff to sleep, and you got crazy spread damage with that Glacial Lance, so you're able to just output a lot of damage while also being super defensive. Wide Guard, Intimidate, Fake Out, Rage Powder, Spore, and then you have attack through Protect. You can put a lot of pressure on with Surging Strikes, as well as Thunderclap on the same Pokemon, ensuring knockout sometimes, or even just doing massive amounts of damage. So there's just a lot of room for this team. Trick Room, it also works outside of Trick Room. If your opponent is heavy Trick Room, then you know you can stop your opponent from setting up Trick Room. There's just There's just so much this team can do. This is sort of the balanced team at the moment, right? And it just has really good switches, really good defensive, really good damage output. It just kind of is the tool for everything. So I would expect this team to be performing very well, though I think there might be some alterations to that team, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. This next team, as you can see, is less than half as good as the first team. The 1% might be a little bit higher, but this team is more used, so therefore it is going to have maybe a lower percentage. There's going to be some players who do not perform well with it, just, average of numbers kind of thing. A team's not always going to carry you. You still got to be a good player kind of situation. But this is a very similar team, except you're replacing, that Pelipper for a Rillaboom, which you could also just use Pelipper on this team too, and you're switching the Caly-Rexes. Otherwise, it's basically the same team. This one does not go into Trick Room at all, so against the Trick Room matchups, it's a little bit worse, so it's not as good against that first team, especially if they're using like Grass Terra on their Caly-Rex. Then this team really doesn't have what it takes to win those matches. And Incineroar with those safety goggles is a very good matchup into this setup. So it does really well into this number 2 team, which does make it a little bit tough. And if we look, we could see that the finishes are a little bit less, right? We're going to see a 14th place, whereas we saw 4 top 10 finishes or whatever for that team. At that North American International, we see some at Indy. It performed into the 30s and 40s, which is okay, into the 90s, but as you could see, it just didn't have as good of a finish. On the grassroots scene, it has performed pretty well. We can see that there was an 11-2 at this tournament, which is a lot of rounds for a grassroots tournament, and it also performed 3rd at that same tournament, it looks like. So grassroots, it has done pretty well. And maybe it's a surprise matchup against this first team here. But I just think it's a little bit left behind, and maybe the numbers are a little bit inflated, especially when you look at those finishes for the official events. And that's what we really want to focus on, is those official events. Next, we have Galapagos, and it's going to match up with that Chi-Yu. This does not have a lot of plays, but it has a pretty good score, considering you could see at the Stockholm Regional and Santiago Regional, this was a pretty popular team. 33rd place at Los Angeles isn't the best, so it was really struggling into that formation, but at Santiago, this was a extremely popular team. We've seen a couple of plays with it. 2nd place at the Timmy's Practice Tour. I wish this had the dates next to it so we could see how recent these were, to really get a gauge of it without having to click on it, because then it's going to take me a different screen, whatever. The Floor Tour volume, what is that, 24, it went 9-1, got 1st place, so there you go. But yeah, you could just see it just didn't really perform too well at Los Angeles. So this is a team that I think is really interesting, and the damage output is very good on this team, and it can be really scary. I think the issue with the team is that it does have a lot of weaknesses, and one of those weaknesses is going to be that Choice Scarf Urshifu that is being used on a lot of teams. It just doesn't really have a way to mitigate any of that damage besides Amoonguss, which means you have to commit to having the Amoonguss out, which is going to really decrease your damage output of your other Pokemon. And if you're facing something like that, that Caly-Rex Ice Rider, they're going to be able to set up that Trick Room right in front of you, because you're going to have to take away that attack from that Urshifu, meaning that they just get a free Trick Room, or they get a free Glacial Lance plus a close combat into your Amoonguss, predicting the Rage Powder, and just getting a knockout onto your Amoonguss potentially. So you got to be very careful about that. And yeah, Galapagos takes some setting up. I know a lot of these are using that Choice Specs set, but some are going back to that calm mindset too, even with the same team composition. And yeah, so it's kind of a toss up which one it's going to be. We've seen Meteor Beam too, but I feel like that's a less consistent effort than the Calm Mind variant. And we've been seeing Covert Cloak as well, so this is definitely going to be the Covert Cloak one. because you don't want that special attack being lowered right next to that Chi-Yu, of course. And yeah, I think that's going to be the best performing one, is going to be that Covert Cloak. But I feel like this team also just loses to this first team, right? Because we do have the wide guard, and we can put things to sleep, and the Trick Room, which is really good against this team, forces them to have to take away your attacks from the Urshifu, and yeah, it just puts it in a really bad position. Of course, Snarls aren't going to really do too much, which is nice for it, but when the Galapagos can't do what it needs to do, it's going to be a hard time. So yeah. Next we have this team, and I really like this team, and you can see it has performed very well. 71% is going to be the highest that we look at. And this is the Goldango version of that first team. There's another alteration, which is which Urshifu you're using, though I think this is variable. I think you could use either Urshifu in this team setup, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see Water Urshifu taking this slot, but I get why Dark Urshifu is used. But I definitely do think that could switch it up. And we see it did really well at Stockholm and Santiago. It also performed decently well at the internationals. We could see in the Los Angeles regionals as well. And yeah, it's performed pretty well. It's just not a lot of people are using this team at the moment. And you can see the good cutoff is around here, which is going to be, you know, at the North American. And the Indianapolis was a while back, so somebody had tried this, performed okay. Didn't make day 2, but that's fine. And then people kind of picked it up and started doing pretty well with it. And, you know, Marco Silva, who is one of my picks for performing well at the World Championships or players to watch, actually got 3rd place at Stockholm with it. And that's a really good performance. You know, at the international, we got 13 from Juan Salerno, which is another player that was on my watch list. So this is just a team that is performing pretty well, and I think is going to have a significant impact. Of course, Calyri's Ice Rider is just so dominant, like I've been saying, but also having that Goldango as an alternative damage output dealer is a really good change up. As you can see from this team, it goes from Pelipper to that Goldango. And this is Terra Normal Goldango more times than not with Nasty Plot. And that's going to get you past those Calyrex Shadow Riders. So this team is just very, very good against Calyrex Shadow Rider teams. So if they get the right matchups, they could win the whole thing, honestly. Though I think the team is a little bit weaker into this matchup because of the fact that it's using Dark Urshifu. I think if they change this to Water Urshifu, it might have a little bit better matchup. But maybe Dark Urshifu is that change-up that it needs. But it just seems like Goldango's not very good against this this lineup here as much it is against this number 2 lineup. And possibly even the number 3 lineup, I think it's pretty good against too. It also has that Trick Room, which could be very good, especially against some of those Miraidon teams, Galapagos teams, the Calyrex Shadow Rider teams. It's all good against those. So I expect this team to perform very well, especially if the people who are using it here continue to use it. I think that it's definitely a team to watch out for. It's going to be a scary one. Next, we have Raj's, basic. I don't want to call it basic, but the Miraidon team, the standard Miraidon team, and it has performed pretty well. We had Indianapolis, Stockholm. It did decent. These are all 6-3, so it's not the greatest in the world. Look at all the Stockholm users. But if we start looking for where it had placed in something like that international, we can see it's not really there. So we're not seeing it from the North American International Championships, which is the most recent tournament. So you kind of want to see some results from that going forward. Though before that, we did have Los Angeles, and both of these players did not perform very well. So this team has really dropped off since the beginning of the format when this stuff was starting to happen. So I would not expect this version of the team to be super successful going into the regionals. People are really prepared for it and know how to play against it now. Some of the higher up teams, especially like this Galapagos team, are very good against this team. So it's just a really difficult team for them to use. You also have, either one of these teams with the Ice Rider can go for Trick Room, which really hurts this team as well. So, yeah, the team has fallen off, though it was a very good team, and I do expect to see Miraidon, just not in this variation. Next we have this Chien-Pao, and if you remember, I put Chien-Pao in S tier. I think Chien-Pao is going to play an incredibly big role at the World Championships. And with this very unique team, we did see it win the Stockholm Regional with Michael, which is McKeel, I think is how you actually say his name. I could be wrong. I've heard it pronounced both ways, so when I was doing my video, I was trying to find out how to say the name, but it was just all over the place. But got first place at Stockholm Regionals with this team, which is just one of the most unique teams we've seen. But if you look forward, once again, North American International, the top place was 141 by Donald Smith, going 6-3, not making day 2. It shows the team has kind of fallen off a little bit. We do see a first place in the Tommy's Tuesday practice tour. Once again, I wish it showed the date so we can know when exactly that was. And we see some 6-3s at Santiago and the Stockholm Regionals. But once again, winning here is a big deal. Keanu got actually 7th place at Indianapolis Regionals, which is way ahead of everybody else with this variation of the team. And if you watch those games, it was very, like, the team is so weird. I could not use this team to save my life. If you were like, you have to win a best of 3 against anybody in the world, basically, and this is the team you have to use, I'd probably lose every single time. I do not understand this team, but if you do, you can play extremely well with this team and just win some games for free. But I do think Chien-Pao Zamazenta is a very strong matchup, and I expect it to do very well at World Championships. Next, we have this Clefairy version. We have seen a couple of people using this. Montana Mott won the Los Angeles Regionals with this, of course. But some other really good players believe in this team, and we saw it performing pretty well at the North American International Championships. I think the problem is a lot of people aren't playing it, or some of the people who are playing it aren't putting up the results, because it is a very, very hard team to use because people are ready for it, right? We could see Len actually used this, which was a mistake because he didn't use Tyranitar. But yeah, so this team is very strong in the fact that you have your Clefairy to be able to really negate a lot of the attacks, especially those dark attacks going into your Calyrex. And then you have 2 fake out users that are going to allow you to pivot and move in and out while your Calyrex sets up or goes for those Astral Barrages. And of course you have Tailwind, and you have a Choice Scarf Urshifu, which is always a good choice, especially next to the Calyrex, because you could force them to not protect and then take over with the Calyrex as well. Some were using After You, though I think that is a less common usage. But After You is also really good, especially into those Calyrex Ice Rider matchups. It allows your Calyrex Shadow, especially if first turn you go for the buff. Next turn, you go for the After You plus the Astral Barrage. You will take out a non-Terra'd Ice Rider. So you can take a little bit of advantage there. So there's a couple of things that you can do with it. But yeah, this team is very, very good. And I expect to see a variation of this team doing pretty well at the World Championships. Though I don't think it's going to win because people are prepared for it. And Wolf Glick actually won a tournament with it too. But it wasn't on Limitless, so I don't think it pops up on here. So, however that works. We're going to look at a few more here. Now we have a different Galapagos team. If we look at the one up here, we see that it has the Ogerpon, which is a little bit different, where this one has the Rillaboom. And then this one also has the Urshifu instead of the Chien-Pao. And we lose the Fluttermane for the Incineroar. So this one's going for a more balanced team approach with the Water, Fire, Grass. You got Double Grass, and you got Tailwind as well as your Galapagos. And I believe this one is more often than not choice specs, just to output as much damage as you can. You got the Fake Out support to help you out there, and you're stopping people from using Protects with that Urshifu. After you get up the Tailwind, it's a very potent attacker, but this team, I think, has lost a lot of viability. Though it did do 11th at the North American International Championships, I think this was a more early team that kind of did pretty well and has lost some with the increase of Pelipper's going around, because you want to terrestrialize this one, so it makes it really, really hard. The next team is going to be the updated version of that Miraidon, and this is going to be the yeah, like it got 4th and 40th at North American Internationals. um it's just the updated version where now you're adding Iron Hands. He gets a boost in his attack while still having that Assault Vest, and you're adding the Chi-Yu to just make your attacks a little bit stronger. I've seen some of these running like Choice Scarf on Chi-Yu, but some of them are also running Focus Sash, so there's a little bit of variation about that. I've also seen one that was Terra Ground, though I don't think that is a good representation of what the team is. I think it's mostly Ghost, because you need to get past that that fake out for sure. So this team is very interesting, and I think in the right hands, this team could be very potent and do some work. But I don't think it's going to do particularly well if somebody does decide to use this team, but we'll have to see. And we'll look at the next two here. We got another variation of this same team where they actually lose the Tornadus for the Raging Bolt. Once again, a lot of people are saying Raging Bolt is going to be the second restricted. And this team is pretty decent too, because when you pair like a very strong defensive Pokemon that can also put out some damage next to a Clefairy, you're going to get a Pokemon that's going to put out damage consistently, and that's always going to be a good thing, right? So I just the last performance was at the Los Angeles Regionals, which was 4th, which is perfectly fine, but as we could see, there really wasn't anything from the internationals, so you know. And the next is the even further variation of that same team, where you actually drop the Clefairy for Smeargle. And this is the team I'd be the most scared of. We see Eduardo Cunha, which is one of the players I have on my list of players to watch. Number 1, in fact. Out of everybody, I think he's number 1, including all the videos I did. But yeah, this team can be absolutely ridiculous. You have, Smeargle for Spore support. It does, it can just go so many things. Like, I want to say all these things, but Decorate is a huge one. You can also go for the Tailwind if you want to use the Tailwind setup, which I don't think Eduardo did here, but I have seen it. But as you can see, it did have a couple of finishes, but nothing crazy except Eduardo, who's an amazing player. And if Eduardo kind of fine-tunes this team and does really well with this team, this could be the team. So, yeah, look forward to this team. I think Smeargle is going to be one of the top Pokemon in my tier list. I put him pretty high because of that. I think that he's a little bit underexplored, and I think people are starting to really realize. I think going into double restricted, he's going to get even better. But we'll have to wait and see. And then there are some good teams down here, don't get me wrong, like this Umbreon team and stuff, but the representation is just so low of these teams that it's really hard to determine whether or not they are good. A lot of them have done pretty well at the grassroots, but haven't really done too well. Like this one got 3rd at Los Angeles, and then it got 38th at the North American, but otherwise it is just tours. So there's a lot of people grinding out with a lot of these teams out in the wild. Okay, but what team do I think is going to win the World Championships? This one. But not this one. A variation of this team. I think the variation is going to be Pelipper gets dropped, because a lot of people are expecting Pelipper, so there's a lot less spread moves, and people are worried that they're going to get caught out with their restricted into these spread moves. I think Pelipper is going to get dropped from this team, and then Clefairy is going to be added to this team. I think Clefairy is very, very good, and I think it's a really, really strong Pokemon. We might even see the Amoonguss dropped for the Clefairy. I think Clefairy is going to win the World Championships no matter what, whether it's this team or not. I just think Clefairy is so strong right now, and yeah, lowering the damage that your restricted is taking is just incredible. And yeah, we'll have to see though. And the World Championship is in less than a month, so it's getting to that time again, and it's going to be exciting. And of course, I'm going to be bringing you guys coverage of the World Championships I'm thinking about doing a daily one. We'll see how that goes because they do start so late because they are in Hawaii. So I'll have time in the morning to like make the video and put it up. So I might be doing that. Just do like a daily update, the stream matches, where everybody is, who's made day 2, you know, whatever it might be. That might be the plan, but we'll see when the time comes closer and kind of what it's looking like. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, make sure you guys thumbs it up. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do so, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.